Happy Election Day 2024 and welcome back to Tansson TV Plus. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Mom.
Yeah, we're always excited to be speaking with you. And Mom, we're doing something a little different today.
Yes, we are. We found an Election Day TV show to talk about. So today we're going to talk about Benson.
Not only is it an Election Day special, but it's also the series finale.
It is. So 2-1 for all of you guys.
Yeah, and so these are the final two episodes of the series Benson from 1986, Friends and Enemies, and the winner is...
Yes, and the winner is the big question.
But Mom, I'm excited to get into this.
Yep, I sure am too, Brandon. Do you want just a very brief synopsis?
Yeah, go right ahead.
All righty. So for the last two episodes, what we discover is this: as Benson is running for governor, the current governor, Gatling, finds out that he actually has the ability to run for governor again. Clayton comes to him and lets him know that there is a loophole in the Constitution, which will allow him to run again because he wouldn't be running for a party. He would be running as an independent, and so Governor Gatling decides that he wants to run for governor. The problem is that Benson has also said he's going to run for governor, and so here we have two people who have been working together for years who have decided that they are going to run against each other, and of course that brings a little bit of friction with this, and they do. Even though they kind of bicker back and forth, they kind of have the same stance on most things. And so the series kind of ends with trying to guess who actually will win the election. And at that point in time, they are quote unquote friends again. And they are together just looking at the results.
Well, Mom, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, and so, we've spoken about Benson once before with the Christmas episode last year, but we're in a very different predicament than we are then, than we were then.
Yeah, we are. It's very rare in this particular show that both the two main characters, quote unquote, don't get along or are bickering with one another. And in this case, they are for most of the two episodes. However, they do have a moment where they get back together and realize that they really are just true friends who just happen to be running for the same office.
I feel like for this last season of Benson that we took a very different tone for the series. We went from more of a sort of lighthearted comedy that happens to have some deep moments to a deeper show, I believe, than the earlier seasons.
Yeah, I think so too. And you could tell they were building up to it because they did there are multiple episodes that aired during that last season that was leading up to this. And you could see the progression, and you could see it as Clayton and Krause are kind of picking at who they wanted to work with. And so, and even Katie, you could see, how they were kind of choosing sides on who they wanted to win. And so that was kind of interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I remembered, of course, the gist of this episode, but I didn't fully remember up until our rewatch of the sort of who chose who, and how exactly this came about with the two friends that we had followed for the 7 seasons up to this point, are now not even speaking to each other, really.
Yeah, they're not. And then they kind of throw something else into to them. Vince is given a running mate that he doesn't particularly care for. So his lieutenant governor that the party, quote unquote, party has nominated for him is not someone that he cares to actually work with.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, too, because Senator Tyler, for Benson's running mate, we've seen him as a recurring character throughout the series, and both the governor and Benson can't stand him. And so it's interesting to see Benson now somewhat warm up to him, or at least tolerate his existence.
Yeah, and then what's funny is when you watch the governor does not have a lieutenant governor who would be running with him. They don't quite talk about that, but they make a big deal about Benson having Senator Tyler, but the governor doesn't have anyone who's kind of going with him, or at least the version that we saw, there wasn't anyone running with him.
Yeah, and speaking of Senator Tyler, as I did a little bit of research, is that the the actor that portrays him was actually one of the producers on the show.
Oh, that's interesting to know.
So yeah, so I guess that's a nice little way to sort of tie that in for these final two episodes. Although I don't think we really see him in the actual finale.
No, actually, you're right. We really don't see them at the end. But I guess they wanted to bring both the characters together to show that they were good working together.
But yeah, and I find it interesting too that whereas Benson, of course, changes his stance on his thoughts on Senator Tyler, the governor changes his stance on some of his policies.
Yeah, he does. There is one particular issue they talk about. It's some sort of water issue that they talk about, and they say that the governor changes the stance, but then we find out later that Benson and the governor really kind of have the same stance. It's just that Benson said he was going to wait longer and analyze it, and that was it.
Yeah, and so what's interesting about this is truly that they're in this dead heat of this election, but in the same regard, like they're running for practically the same policies, the same administration for the most part, but they disagree as to who should be the one to implement it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, very true.
But yeah, and something I actually want to borrow from some of our Port Charles chats though is that since on those we mention a lot of our sort of favorite parts and whatnot. And so, was there anything that you found amusing from these two episodes?
From these two episodes, Clayton. I think Clayton is just amusing in himself in general, and so he's like a breath of fresh air sometimes. And so, watching Clayton as he was struggling with who he wanted to actually work with, because initially, of course, he was all for Benson, and then once he found out the governor was running, he didn't know what to do because he knows he needs a job and he's trying to figure out where that job's going to be at. He did ask to be lieutenant governor, and the governor said no. So, so it was just kind of fun to watch Clayton and see how his reaction to everything.
Yeah, and especially given that even though he was, of course, on Governor Gatling's side, is that he said that I don't really want to vote for either one of you.
I know, I know. So, yeah, so that was just kind of fun to watch.
But yeah, and then I kind of like the oftentimes we see, of course, Benson and Miss Krause bickering, but we saw it in a different manner, so to speak, for these last few episodes.
Yeah, because Krause actually was the person who was supporting Benson. And so even when the governor decided to run, Krause decided that she was going to continue supporting Benson. And so that's where the division lied. And the governor, no, I'm sorry, that Krause decided to go one way, and then Clayton decided to go with the governor.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting though is I want to speak about the time that the governor makes his decision to run again, and that he had wanted to support Benson. That was the whole agreement, is that Benson was running to continue the spirit of Gatling's administration, but then he changes his mind and decides to run. But I found that whole scene really amusing, and seeing his sort of rationale as to why he wanted to run.
Yeah, well, his true rationale was really that he said he liked the job. He did say that, but it was really came down to Katie. He said that he wanted to run because Katie needed to finish school, and she had a year, I guess, a year left or whatever. But so yeah, so his two reasons were he did say he enjoyed the job, but then he said, "Oh, and Katie needs to finish school."
Yeah, and what was interesting is, I mean, speaking of Katie, though, is, I mean, we know that, of course, she's on her father's side, but in my remembering, of the episodes, that I didn't fully realize, to which extent, because he even asks, it's like, well, would you be comfortable with me running against Benson? And she's like, yeah, well, he'll figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, she did say that.
But yeah, but overall, I said I really like I said the series, and I think this is a very unique ending for the series.
Yeah, it is unique. It's unique. Can I tell why, Brandon?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, it's unique because we don't have an answer. When the series, on the last portion of the series, they say, and the winner is, and it is left where we do not know who won the election.
But yeah, but we do get an interesting little montage that we just saw.
Yes, and it's something that I never picked up on before. What year did you say it ended, Brandon Benson?
So yeah, the series ended in 1986.
Okay. So in 1986, at that point in time, I would have been overseas, so I wouldn't have seen this live. And so in watching it in reruns, I had no idea that they had a little montage at the end. And the montage I thought was very kind of intriguing because they actually list the years that Benson received a promotion. So it said in there in 1979 that Benson was brought on as the head of household affairs, and then it said in 1981 he became the budget director, and then in 1984 he became the lieutenant governor. And then it ended with in 1986, kind of like a question mark per se. And so we could all make predictions. I mean, I'll tell you my prediction is that I think that Vincent won. Brandon, what do you think your predictions are?
Yeah, I definitely think that Benson, would have won, become governor, but then I feel like as governor, he'd maybe appoint Governor Gatling as maybe like a senator.
Yeah, and my thought too also is that Benson would have actually given the governor a job, and like you said, senator or something. It'll be an important job that he would have given the governor, and that way they could continue working with each other.
Yeah, and I feel like if it had been reversed, I feel like the same sort of thing would have happened. The question is, where would Clayton have gone?
Oh, oh, Benson would have kept Clayton, so Clayton always would have had a job.
But yeah, and I like that Clayton throughout this episode. Whenever someone mentioned that we're going to have a job for you in our administration, it's like, what type of job?
Yeah, yes.
But yeah, and Mom, even though we've spoken about the show before, this is the first one for this channel. So are you able to let us know what are your thoughts about the Benson theme song?
Oh, I absolutely love the Benson theme song. I know that it is just it's an instrumental, but it's an instrumental that kind of stands out. Or at least if you watch Benson, you will know the Benson theme song.
Yes, absolutely. And I love the different scenes. And something I'd actually noticed, because last year we were going through all of the different Benson episodes, is that throughout the years there's certain types of scenes that were there throughout. For instance, the scene I believe right before the governor is credited is always Benson and the governor like shaking hands or hugging or something. And so there's certain like scenes that you saw throughout the years that sort of evolved with the show.
Yeah, sure did. And there was other things that I noticed too, with not necessarily the theme song, but with the last episode that I don't think we had a lot of closure with. Not only did we not know who won, but we also didn't know what happened to Vincent and Diane because, I mean, it was brought up on the next to last episode, and the question was, are they going to get married? And then, um, and then the last episode, I don't think they brought it up at all. So we don't know what actually happens with them later. I mean, I barely remember that Diane existed, and so when we watched it, it was I looked and said, "Oh, well, wonder what was supposed to happen to them." And then of course, like we talked about, we also wonder if they lose, what job would they really have. So you're just kind of left, kind of guessing, and not only with both of them, but then, like you said, with Clayton and with Krause also.
Yeah, and so I wanted to ask you, about that too. And so, do you think this was a fitting end for the series?
I think so. I think you read somewhere where they weren't sure if it was going to come back because I think if I remember reading somewhere, and please quote me if I'm wrong, that they actually kind of filmed an ending, um, going both ways. I think if I remember reading that somewhere.
I think I remember that
Um,
too.
yeah, so it'd be interesting if they ever have writers that come out later and just actually say which way were they really going to go if the series actually came back for the following year.
But yeah, and I agree with you too. As unsettling sort of as the ending is, and actually these two episodes, like I said, these are more serious than the comically funny. The show is that I feel like it's just such a perfect ending because we're able to sort of get closure at least on the relationship between Benson and Governor Gatling. Um, but what are your thoughts about the sort of lack of closure for these other characters, like we were mentioning?
Well, it just kind of leaves you feeling a little uneasy because you don't know how it kind of ends altogether. But I will say this, Brian, because you and I both binged the business series, and we did this about a year or so ago, and I was surprised that I really enjoyed the show because I didn't realize how funny it was, or I should say, how witty the show was, and so I think the writers did a good job on the show.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I really feel that, yeah, this is just such a funny, like you said, witty show. Um, that, yeah, I mean, it brought me real joy, like watching the show. And speaking of sort of closures, that, yeah, for these other seasons, even though we haven't had a chance to speak with them yet, is that whenever, for the most part, characters disappear, is that they gave them real endings.
Yeah, they did. As the characters went on, gave them a show to dedicate to why they were leaving. I think the only person we don't really know about is that on the first season there was a gentleman there, the guy before Clayton, and I can't remember his name. But I think there may have been a line in when it came back, the second season, but other he's the only one that didn't have his own show dedicated to him for leaving, but every other character they gave them their show and kind of led up to them leaving.
Yeah, I don't know if they ever gave one to to that one character, John Taylor, I believe. But yeah, I mean, I really like that it was able to do that because not every show has characters departing. You know, allow for them to depart in a nice way.
Yeah, very true, very true.
But yeah, but like we were saying before, I feel like for this show, it's so weird seeing that, let's say, even though those other characters got those endings, that the show ended the way it did. But like I said, I think it was the perfect ending for the show.
Yeah, it was. And we'd love to know, who do you think won the election? Do you think it was Benson, or do you think it was the governor? Let us know.
Yeah, and is there anything else that you'd like to see from us from Benson? I know we love the show, and so let us know if there's any other episodes that you'd like us to discuss.
Yes. And thank you so much for joining us today.
And we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Happy Election Day, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.